If you love reading, the San Diego Writers Festival is for you. I think it's wonderful when you can surround yourself with things that you love and enjoy. And for me, that's reading and writing. And this event just basically was exactly that. And I just felt so fulfilled after going to it. Hey there, welcome to the Millennial Book Junkie. My name is Monique, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my experience at the San Diego Writers Festival. This is a free community-based event in San Diego that celebrates the power of writing and storytelling. Basically, it's an event where authors come together, share their books, share their stories, and readers are just devouring every second. If you love reading, the San Diego Writers Festival is for you. It's not just for writers. I initially found out about this while compiling bookish events for my March Thriller Watch, and I found out that Jodi Picoult was going to be there. And that was what initially drew me to this festival because I have been reading Jodi Picoult for years. I think I started reading her in like 2004, and I have never read a book by her that didn't make me cry. She is amazing. And so that's what initially drew me to this festival. And so I went online to register for her keynote, and I saw that there was like all these other things happening at this festival. There are workshops, there are panels, there are author book signings. There's going to be authors there trying to sell their books. There's going to be small publishers there. And I was like, this seems like an all-day event more so than just like a one event thing. So I'm going to go the whole day. So I initially planned to just see Jodi Picoult, but then I ended up going the whole day. And I actually set a schedule for myself so that I could go to like multiple workshops. And the night before, I was just so giddy with excitement. It was a book lover's dream. It's an aspirational writer's dream. And I cannot wait to share with you guys all the cool stuff that I learned here. So I ended up signing up for a workshop on how to get through the query letter process if you are writing a book and looking for a literary agent. And I also signed up for workshops on what it's like to write horror and also what it's like to try and get your book traditionally published. I love reading horror. I love writing horror. I'm writing my first book. So all these workshops and panels just sounded like right up my alley. On the day of the festival, I got there really early. I got there like right when it started, or if not a few minutes before. And so there was no check-in process if you weren't like a volunteer or a speaker. So I just kind of walked up and I saw that they had all the signs for all the workshops and all the panels, which was really exciting to see in person. And then they had like an easel with a printout of all these book covers, and all the authors of those books were at the festival. So it was really cool to walk up and see what authors were going to be there just based on the cover of all those books. So because I got there a little early, when I walked into the area where it was, people were still setting up like the tents. And when I got there, I was given like a brochure and a little tent crawl postcard where you could go to each tent and get, little stamps and get a prize at the end. And so I tried to get a look at everything before I went to my first workshop, but people were still setting up. So I told myself I was going to have to come back and do a little shopping later. So I decided to head to my first workshop. And this workshop was all about the querying process. So when you want to publish a book, you have to query literary agents so they can represent you and pitch your book to different publishers. Author Lyn Liao Butler was giving a workshop on the querying process. And if you're not familiar with her, she's the author of the Deadly Book Club. I mentioned her in my October Thriller Watch. And so I was really, really excited that she was going to be there because she has published multiple books. And so I made it there. I sat close to the front and I was really excited to learn all about the querying process from someone who has so much experience. I was highly caffeinated. I was taking a lot of notes, and everything she said was just like light bulbs going off in my head. Essentially, she was just saying that book deals are still happening. If you are writing a book, they are happening. Don't get discouraged. There are agents looking for new authors. And she shared resources on how to keep track of what literary agents are accepting or passing on. Like you can use a resource called Query Tracker to see what literary agents are requesting more pages of, like what they're passing on. And I just didn't know we had that insight as aspirational writers. I didn't know that you could actually go in and see what was happening with that. I had no idea you could do that. You could also get a subscription to Publishers Marketplace and you can see what book deals are happening. That is like the coolest thing ever. So I learned about those two resources in this class. And she was just sharing so many nuggets of wisdom and just like tips on what to do when you're querying, who to pitch first. And I just walked away from that whole workshop feeling so motivated and not too terrified to go ahead and try and find a literary agent when the time is right. And so after that workshop, I was just like, this is amazing. I took so many notes, and Lyn Liao Butler knows what's up. So after that workshop, I took a little breather, and then I went to a panel with a bunch of horror writers, some which you are probably familiar with, like Jonathan Maeberry, Lilium Rivera, Casey Griffiths, and Justin Key. So this was called The Art of Fear. It was a writer's panel on basically what makes spine-chilling stories fun to read and write. And it had to do with horror, so I absolutely was like, I need to be there. I also Googled Jonathan Maeberry while I was there because his name sounded really familiar, and I realized that he wrote that book, Patient Zero, which I have in my shelf, or at least I had years ago, and I definitely read that book. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. He's been around a long time, and he has a lot of books. Horror readers, like big-time horror readers, will definitely be familiar with him. So it was really cool to be in the same space with him, and listening to him and the three other authors talk about horror in a really candid way was so refreshing, because I feel like horror is really having a moment right now. I mean, you had Weapons and Sinners both winning at the Oscars, which is really, really cool. So it was cool to kind of hear what they had to say about how they feel about horror and what makes them scared. One of the panelists said that he watched The Exorcist when he was 5 years old, and that kind of introduced him to horror. And I will have to say, same. That's about the time I saw it too. And yeah, these things really shape us and our love for horror. A few of the great things I took away from this panel is that horror is really cathartic. Like, you can create a version of something that's really scary to you, you can put it in fiction, you can feed it, and then at the end of the day, you can walk away from it. Like, horror really allows us to experience these terrible things without actually experiencing them. And I feel like that's something that, for whatever reason, I am drawn to, and a lot of these authors as well. Because writing horror allows you to experience your own fears in a completely safe space. And so listening to these people just talk about writing horror was just so cool. And I asked them questions on like how to go from like a seed of an idea to like a finished novel, and every one of them gave me different answers. I loved getting all the different perspectives. So after this awesomely horrific panel, I was starting to get really hungry. I think it was about noon, and the next talk was at 12:30 with Luke Dumas and Jonathan Maeberry, and I was like, I really want to attend that, but I'm really hungry. And not to mention, I really wanted to shop. There was like a lot of cute little areas where they were selling bookish stuff, bookmarks, t-shirts. Also, Warwick Books was there, and that's a bookstore here in SD, and they had all kinds of books out, and I was like, I could do some serious damage here. I need to stop and just like shop books for a little while. So I got some lunch, and I decided to check out the books, and I bought 3 books. Nothing Tastes as Good by Luke Dumas, The Hospital at the End of the World by Justin Key, and Tiny Threads by Lilium Rivera. All of these authors were at this event, and Lilium Rivera and Justin Key were both at that horror panel, and I just really wanted to support them. The only thing that I'm like really sad about was I couldn't get these signed, because right after I bought them, I went to the Luke Dumas and Jonathan Maeberry talk, and I thought that the authors were just going to be there all day signing books. I was wrong. They were only going to be there for like 30 minutes, maybe an hour signing books. So I missed these 2 authors, so I couldn't get these books signed, but it's okay. I still got to make my Jonathan Maeberry and Luke Dumas chat, and that was really awesome too. The one thing though that really kept me from focusing on the chat between Luke Dumas and Jonathan Maeberry though was the fact that my coffee spilled in my backpack when I got there. So not only did they get there late because I wanted to eat lunch and shop, but when I got there, I had my coffee in like a Yeti and it was closed, and I put it in my backpack sitting up so that it wouldn't spill, and there was only like this much in it, but it spilled. And so right when I sat down to that chat with Luke Dumas and Jonathan Maeberry, I literally like could see that my backpack, like the bottom of my backpack was wet, and the whole time during their conversation, I couldn't help but think, my laptop is in there, my headphones are in there. And I was just like, I can't really leave because I would have to cross in front of them while they were talking. And I could smell the coffee creamer coming from my backpack. And I was just like, this is happening. This is happening. And so it made it really hard to listen to them, but whatever they were saying was awesome. I know I recorded a bunch of it, but yeah, sucks about the backpack. So right after their talk was over, I raced to the bathroom to like try to clean out my backpack as much as I could. Luckily, my laptop and my headphones were actually in a sleeve of my backpack, so they didn't get wet, but my entire backpack just smelled so bad, and it took a while to kind of clean it out. And while I was coming out of the bathroom, I saw people forming a large line right in front of the auditorium where I was at. And I realized it was to see Jodi Picoult. And it was like 1:30, and her keynote was not until 2:30. And I was like, why are all these people lining up early? And I had registered for that event, so I was worried that I had to line up too. And so I went up to the people there and I asked them if it was okay to like come back in 30 minutes, and they said it was totally fine. I really wanted to get a coffee, and Luke Dumas was signing books, so I really wanted to catch him while he was signing his book. So I raced to get coffee, and I totally caught him while he was signing books, and he signed my book, Nothing Tastes as Good. To Monique, I hope you devour this. Luke Dumas. So cool. So after that, it was time to go back and get in line for Jodi Picoult. And this line went halfway down the block. Even though I had registered for the event, it was free, but I still registered on Eventbrite, and it was still long, and I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to get in. But the people in line told me that if you registered, you were guaranteed a spot in. And I also didn't know how big the auditorium was. And I was like, I don't know how many people they can fit in here, but I was really hopeful that because I registered that I was going to be able to get in. And sure enough, I was able to get in. They did have a standby line for all the people who did not register. Once I walked into the auditorium, though, I could tell that there was like so many seats. It was a huge auditorium. So I didn't think that, they were going to run out of seats or anything. And by the time everyone was seated, it looked like there were still tons of seats. So I think everyone made it in. And so when I sat down, I had a clear view of the stage, and some volunteers were passing around little index note cards with pencils so you could ask Jodi questions. And I was like, there are so many people here. There is no way she's going to answer all these questions. But I wrote down my question anyway. And my question for her was really just how she does all this research, because she does so much research on her books that I'm curious about her research process. So I asked her that, but of course it didn't get answered. It was only like an hour talk, and they did go through the index cards, but they definitely didn't get to everyone. So when Jodi came out, it was so awesome because I love seeing authors in real life, and she has been a big one for me for many, many years. And they gave her a Writer of the Year award. And basically you had two women interviewing her for about 45 minutes about her latest book, By Any Other Name. Now, when I first heard about her book, I was like, oh, how cute. It's like a line from Shakespeare. I was like, oh, I wonder what it's about. And I had no idea what it was about.
By Any Other Name is about how women have been written out of history by the men who were writing it. It follows two different women. One is the very real person, Emilia Bassano, who in 1581 was a female playwright, except she couldn't be a playwright because as a woman she couldn't get her work in front of the public in Elizabethan England. So she pays a man for the use of his name, and that man's name happens to be William Shakespeare.
I had no idea that it was a historical fiction novel about a woman that could potentially have been using Shakespeare's name.
And it's also about her descendant, a fictional character named Melina Green. Melina has written a play about her ancestor Emilia and can't get any traction in the Broadway world because it is still a very male-dominated world. And so the question is whether she too will write herself out of history in order to see her work on the stage.
So So the women in this book were struggling to be taken seriously as playwrights. And after 30 novels, she is still struggling to get taken seriously. And she spotlighted a lot of things that I, of course, know to be true about the treatment of women these days. And she did share one story about her writing on an airplane that I'll let her share with you.
I go on book tour. I go on very long book tours when a book comes out. And that means that every day I'm on a different plane. And usually I am sitting next to a man in a business suit. And they see me typing and they say, "What do you do?" And I say, "Oh, I'm a writer." And inevitably the answer is children's books. And I go, "No." And they go, "Romance." So here we are in 2026, and we are still pigeonholing women into the places that we think they should fit. And I always say, I get asked all the time, "Oh, what's your favorite book?" By Any Other Name it is my favorite book, and it's because it's the only book that I have written where I feel like I have the same personal stakes that Amelia did. I write about some pretty awful stuff, and I am very fortunate to have not lived the lives of many of my characters, but I live this every single day.
Jodi said that this book was really meaningful for her because it was the first time that she really was living the same struggles that the character in this book is living. So as you heard, the book is about a woman who potentially could have been the author of many of Shakespeare's works. And her evidence for this are a few of these facts that I think you'll be really, really interested to know. So the first thing that was crazy is that Shakespeare, after he died, when he died, he didn't own a single book. So that tells you right there, like when a writer doesn't own a single book and there's no internet, where is he getting all this information from? Especially when there was no libraries. Where is it coming from? Also, Shakespeare never left England, but he writes in great detail about all these places around the world. Another key thing that Jodi mentioned was that Shakespeare never owned or played an instrument, yet there are over 3,000 references to instruments in his works. So those are some really interesting things that I learned and that now you have learned and that you can share with people. Overall, I just really loved this conversation with her. I really didn't know she was so outspoken about rights for women, rights for Black and brown people, queer people, people with disabilities. She's also really passionate about access to books and banned books. Like there's a lot of books that are banned that I didn't know about. For instance, I didn't know that her book 19 Minutes was banned. I was wondering at first why it was banned, and then she shared it with us.
The reason 19 Minutes is banned, just so you know, is not because it's about a school shooting. It is because of page 313 and the word erection. And it is being banned in high school libraries because high school students don't know what that is.
So needless to say, I absolutely loved seeing Jodi Picoult in this environment, and hearing from her was so awesome. And I just learned so much, and I was just feeling so overjoyed and filled up after this. And of course, I went and I bought 2 of her books. And we all knew she wasn't going to do a book signing because that wasn't on the docket for this event, and that probably would have taken 5 hours. But she did leave tons of signed books behind, and I bought 2 of them. The first was The Book of Two Ways, and the second was By Any Other Name. And I am so excited to read this one. This is the Shakespeare one, and I am just like, I might need to read this like next month. It just sounds so good. And she put so much research into this, like you just know it's gonna be good. So I walked away from that keynote very happy with 5 new books. And then I ran into Lyn Liao Butler and I asked if I could take a selfie with her, and she happily agreed. I initially had wanted to see her after that query workshop, but I didn't get a chance, so I was so happy I got to run into her after the keynote. So at this point, I was tired, I was sweaty, and smelling like coffee creamer, but I made it to the final workshop. It was 4 p.m. and this one was all about the publishing process. It was called Setting Yourself Up to Make Your Publishing Dreams Come True by Christine Pride, who is a former editor and a longtime publishing veteran. And she basically told us how the publishing process works. So we know that if you want to get a book published, first you have to get an agent. So you submit a query to an agent, and when they choose to represent you, they start shopping your work around to different publishers. Well, an editor is the one that reads that manuscript and says, okay, I'll pitch it to the publishing house. And so the editor then pitches your story to the publishing team, and then they all have to decide whether or not they're going to take you on and publish your book. And Christine had so much experience with this. It was so cool to hear about like the different levels of advances that writers get. I think she said it can range from like 5,000 to like 60 million. And then the person interviewing her was like, who got 60 million for an advance? Barack Obama. So yeah, 60 million is not the norm, guys. But it was really cool to hear about that whole process. And I think my biggest takeaway from that whole workshop was that books are a business, and if a publisher doesn't know where your book is going to fit on the shelf, they are not going to want to take it. They're not going to want to try and sell it, because if it can't sell, they don't want it. And so I'm probably preaching to the choir, you guys know this, but I thought that was really good to drive home, especially, you know, I'm writing my first book and I'm almost done with the first draft of it. And there's a lot I need to think about in terms of what this book is comparable to and where it's going to sit on the shelf. And so I was so grateful to Christine for sharing all this intel with us, because now we know this whole process. Like, once you find an editor at a publishing house, like, there's more edits that needs to be done. Like, that was another thing. And she also said it was really important to like know your book off the top of your head, like quick one-line summary that gets people interested. And I just felt like her advice was top notch and so needed. Even though I was kind of tired at the end of the day, it was so great to hear all that stuff. So as you can tell, there was a lot going on at this festival, and I absolutely loved it. I kept walking around and looking at all the books and all the bookish things. I bought a shirt and a bookmark and 5 books. I mean, I got my books signed, or at least some of them, and it was just so exciting, and I'm so, so grateful that I got to go. I think it's wonderful when you can surround yourself with things that you love and enjoy, and for me, that's reading and writing, and this event just basically was exactly that. And I just felt so fulfilled after going to it. So now let me ask you a question as a book lover, as a thriller reader. Are you as obsessed with reading as I am and finding out all the new books? If you are, you should join my bookish newsletter, where every Tuesday I send out all the new releases in the horror and thriller genre, and all the fun books that I'm reading and other bookish news that I know you'll love. So if you're interested in joining my bookish newsletter, you can subscribe at the link in the description box below. And if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. I would so love it. And thank you so, so much for watching. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.